The crisp autumn breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves and cafeteria food as Olivia Thompson hurried across the high school courtyard, clutching her homemade lunch to her chest. What began as an ordinary Tuesday at Jefferson High would spiral into an event that would make national headlines and change the trajectory of her quiet suburban existence forever. The sound of helicopter rotors would soon drown out the typical high school chatter, but not before a simple act of kindness revealed a truth that had been hiding in plain sight for years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Olivia navigated the crowded hallways with practiced ease, her worn backpack heavy with textbooks and dreams too big for the small town of Millfield. At 17, she was already planning her escape, college applications spread across her bedroom desk like battle plans for a future far from the predictable rhythms of her hometown. Her scholarship essays were narratives of ambition that her classmates found both inspiring and slightly intimidating. "Hey, Thompson." Mason Parker's voice cut through the hallway noise as he jogged to catch up with her. "Did you finish the calc homework? Mr. Richards is collecting it first thing, and I'm completely lost on problem 17. Olivia smiled, adjusting her glasses with her free hand. "Partial derivatives. You need to treat the other variables as constants when you differentiate with respect to one variable." Mason's confusion was evident, his athlete's confidence faltering in the face of mathematical concepts. "Could you maybe show me during lunch?" "Sure," Olivia replied, checking her watch. "I need to drop something off at the library first, but I'll meet you in the cafeteria." The library was quiet, a sanctuary from the chaotic energy of high school life. Olivia returned her borrowed books, nodding politely to Mrs. Winters, the librarian who had been guiding her reading choices since elementary school. It was then that she noticed him, a man in his 30s sitting alone at a corner table, military posture evident even in repose. His uniform was crisp, decorated, with ribbons and insignia that Olivia couldn't identify, but recognized as markers of service and sacrifice. What caught her attention wasn't his uniform, but his expression, a 1,000-yard stare that seemed to look through the walls of the library to somewhere distant and perhaps terrible. There was something in his stillness that spoke of exhaustion, beyond physical fatigue. The remains of a vending machine lunch sat untouched beside an open book he wasn't reading. Olivia hesitated. Her mother had raised her to respect boundaries, but also to recognize need when she saw it. The soldier's face reminded her of her father in the months before he left, present in body but absent in spirit. Acting on instinct, rather than calculation, she approached his table. "Excuse me, sir." Her voice came out softer than intended. The soldier blinked, his focus returning from wherever it had been. "Yes?" His voice was rough from disuse. "I noticed you haven't eaten your lunch, and I have extra." It wasn't precisely true. The homemade sandwich and fresh fruit were her entire meal, but the lie felt necessary in the moment. "I thought you might like something better than vending machine food." Surprise flickered across his weathered features, followed by something that might have been gratitude. "That's very kind of you, miss, but I couldn't take your lunch." "I insist," Olivia said, setting her carefully packed lunch on the table. "My mom always makes too much anyway." Another small lie that seemed inconsequential. The soldier studied her face as if searching for hidden motives, then nodded once. "Thank you." He offered nothing more, no name, no explanation for his presence in a high school library on a Tuesday morning. "You're welcome." Olivia smiled, then turned to leave, already calculating whether she had enough cash in her wallet for the cafeteria's dubious pizza. "Wait," the soldier called, his voice slightly less rough. "May I ask your name?" "Olivia." "Olivia Thompson." He nodded again, a gesture that seemed to carry the weight of formal acknowledgement. "Sergeant Michael Reeves, 75th Ranger Regiment." I appreciate your kindness, Olivia Thompson. The bell rang, signaling the beginning of the lunch period. Olivia hurried to meet Mason, the encounter already filing itself away as an interesting anecdote to share with her mother later. She couldn't have known that Sergeant Reeves was watching her leave, memorizing her face with the precision of someone accustomed to retaining critical details in high-stress situations. Nor could she have known that he was immediately reaching for his phone, sending a text message containing only her name and the words, "Confirmed contact." The cafeteria buzzed with the energy of 300 teenagers temporarily freed from classroom confinement. Olivia bought a slice of pizza that looked slightly less questionable than the others and joined Mason at their usual table. So partial. Derivatives, she began, pulling out her calculator. Mason's attention had already drifted. Did you see the new guy? Military dude in the library? Briefly, Olivia replied, trying to redirect the conversation to calculus. About problem 17. Dad says they're recruiting or something. Career day stuff. But it's weird, right? They never come to Jefferson. Mason's father worked in the school district's administrative office, making him a reliable source of information, if not always accurate in his interpretations. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The calculus homework was eventually completed between bites of mediocre pizza and Mason's theories about military recruitment strategies. Olivia found her thoughts returning to Sergeant Reeves and the shadows behind his eyes. Her father had been a civilian contractor for the military, his work classified and his absences frequent. The memory of his departure 6 years ago still carried the sting of abandonment, though her mother insisted it had been more complicated than that. When the final bell rang at 3:15, Olivia gathered her books and headed for the bus loop. The October air had turned chilly, and she zipped her jacket against the wind. Above the normal after-school chaos, a sound gradually registered, the rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors, growing louder by the second. Students paused in their exodus, heads tilting upward as one military helicopter appeared above the tree line, then another and another, until 8 Black Hawks circled the school in a coordinated pattern that was both impressive and unsettling. Teachers emerged from the building, their expressions ranging from concern to outright alarm. Principal Garrett hurried into the courtyard, his voice barely audible above the rotor noise. Everyone inside, return to the building immediately. Confusion rippled through the crowd. Fire drills and lockdown procedures were familiar, but no one had protocols for military helicopters circling the school. Some students complied immediately, while others stood filming with their phones, expressions caught between excitement and fear. Olivia Thompson. Principal Garrett's voice cut through the noise with surprising clarity. To my office now. A path cleared between Olivia and the principal as if by magic, curious eyes following her progress. She clutched her backpack. Straps, mind racing through possible explanations. Had something happened to her mother? Was this somehow connected to her father's disappearance? The walk to the principal's office felt like a procession through a gauntlet of whispers. Inside, Olivia found not just Principal Garrett, but 3 uniformed military officers and a woman in a dark suit whose authority was evident in her posture. Sergeant Reeves stood in the corner, his expression unreadable. "Miss Thompson," the woman in the suit began, "I'm Special Agent Diana Chun with the Department of Defense. We need to ask you some questions about your interaction with Sergeant Reeves earlier today." Olivia's confusion must have shown on her face because Principal Garrett added, "You're not in trouble, Olivia. These people just need some information. I just gave him my lunch," Olivia stammered, looking between the stern faces. "He looked hungry and sad, and I thought, it's not about the lunch," Agent Chun interrupted gently. "It's about what you might have given him besides food." "I don't understand." Earlier today, you approached Sergeant Reeves in the library and initiated contact. During this interaction, did you pass him any electronic devices, documents, or verbal messages? From anyone else? The absurdity of the question momentarily stunned Olivia. No. I just gave him a sandwich and an apple. Why would I? And did he give you anything in return? Perhaps something to deliver to someone else, or information to remember. He told me his name, that's it. Olivia's initial confusion was giving way to indignation. What is this about? The military officers exchanged glances, a silent communication that excluded everyone else in the room. Agent Chun's expression softened slightly. Olivia, have you had any contact with your father in the past 6 years? The question hit like a physical blow. My father? He left. Mom said he couldn't come back. The familiar ache of his absence intensified under the scrutiny of these strangers. What does my dad have to do with helicopters circling our school? Agent Chun opened a folder and placed a photograph on the desk. It showed a man in civilian clothes standing before a desert backdrop, his face older and more weathered than Olivia remembered, but unmistakably her father. This was taken 3 months ago in Syria. Your father didn't leave, Olivia. He was recruited for a highly classified operation that required him to sever all contact with his previous life. The room seemed to tilt as Olivia stared at the photograph. 6 years of unanswered questions, of birthdays and graduations marked by his absence, compressed into a single moment of revelation. He's alive? Very much so, Agent Chun confirmed. And his work has been crucial to national security. We believe certain hostile entities have discovered his identity and may be attempting to use his family connections to compromise his position. Principal Garrett, looking increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation, cleared his throat. Perhaps this discussion could continue somewhere more private. And should Miss Thompson's mother be present? Mrs. Thompson is already being brought to a secure location, one of the military officers stated. And as for privacy, he gestured toward the window, where the helicopters maintained their vigilant circle around the school. That opportunity has passed. We have reason to believe Sergeant Reeves was not who he claimed to be. Olivia's gaze snapped to the corner where Reeves had been standing, only to find the space empty. He was just there. Alarms began blaring throughout the building, followed by the unmistakable sound of the school's lockdown announcement. Agent Chun's hand moved to her weapon as she barked orders into her radio. Perimeter breach. All units on alert. Find Reeves. Principal Garrett was ushered toward his desk phone to coordinate the school's emergency response, while 2 officers positioned themselves at the office door. Olivia stood frozen in the center of the sudden storm of activity, the photograph of her father still clutched in her hand. Olivia, Agent Chun said firmly, regaining her attention, I need you to think carefully. Did Sergeant Reeves say anything unusual to you? Anything that seemed out of place or coded? The memory of their brief interaction replayed in Olivia's mind. He just thanked me and told me his name and unit. 75th Ranger Regiment. One of the officers by the door turned sharply. The 75th isn't deployed locally for any purpose, and no authorized personnel would identify their unit to a civilian during an operation. A new wave of understanding washed over Olivia. He wasn't really a soldier, was he? Oh, he's military, all right, Agent Chun replied grimly. Just not ours. We believe he's part of a foreign intelligence unit that's been tracking your father's operation. They've been searching for leverage, and a 17-year-old daughter would be excellent leverage indeed. The implications crashed through Olivia's carefully constructed worldview. Her father wasn't an abandoning parent, but a secret operative. The sad soldier wasn't seeking comfort, but confirmation of her identity. And now her simple act of kindness had potentially compromised national security and placed her mother in danger. What happens now? she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Agent Chun's reply was interrupted by urgent voices in her earpiece. Her expression shifted from concern to alarm. "Change of plans. We need to move you immediately. The school is no longer secure." The next few minutes blurred into a chaotic progression. Olivia was hustled through back hallways she barely recognized, surrounded by a protective formation of agents and officers. Outside, one of the Black Hawks descended toward the football field, its rotors whipping the grass into frenzied waves. Students pressed against classroom windows, filming the surreal scene with wide-eyed disbelief. As they crossed the exposed space between the building and the helicopter, a sharp crack echoed across the field. One of the officers stumbled, clutching his shoulder as crimson bloomed across his uniform. More shots followed, sending the group into a crouching run toward the waiting helicopter. "Sniper!" someone shouted, unnecessarily. The helicopter's door gunner began returning fire toward the tree line, providing cover and suppression as Olivia was practically lifted into the aircraft. Agent Chun vaulted in behind her, shouting orders to the pilot as the wounded officer was dragged aboard by his colleagues. The helicopter lifted immediately, banking sharply away from the direction of the gunfire. Olivia gripped the edge of her seat, knuckles white, as the school receded below them. Through the open door, she could see students being evacuated from the building by police and the remaining military personnel, their faces upturned to watch her departure. "Where are we going?" she shouted over the rotor noise, watching her ordinary life shrink into the distance. "Somewhere safe," Agent Chun replied, checking the wounded officer's injury. "Somewhere your father can find you." The helicopter joined formation with the others, their coordinated movements speaking of extensive training and experience. Olivia Thompson, who had begun her day worried about calculus homework and college applications, found herself airborne and hunted, the center of an operation she couldn't comprehend, headed toward a reunion she had stopped hoping for years ago. In the chaos of departure, she realized she was still clutching the photograph of her father in Syria. His eyes, so familiar despite the years, seemed to look directly into hers with a mixture of pride and regret. Olivia tucked the photo carefully into her jacket pocket as the helicopters carried her toward a future that had been set in motion long before she offered her lunch to a quiet soldier. The wounded officer gritted his teeth as a medic applied pressure to his injury. "Sorry about your school," he managed, attempting a smile that looked more like a grimace. It's okay," Olivia replied, surprising herself with the calm in her voice. "I was planning to leave anyway." As Jefferson High disappeared beneath the horizon, Olivia realized that her carefully plotted escape from Millfield had arrived in a form she could never have imagined. The college essays on her desk seemed suddenly childish and incomplete. How could she have written about her future when she hadn't even understood her past? The helicopter banked again, heading toward mountains in the distance that had always formed the boundary of her known world. Beyond them lay answers to questions she was only beginning to formulate, and a father whose absence had shaped her in ways she was just starting to recognize. Sergeant Reeves, or whoever he really was, had seen something in her that she hadn't seen in herself. Something worth risking an operation for. Something that connected her to a world of shadows and secrets that had been running parallel to her ordinary existence all along. Agent Chun watched her with an appraising eye. "You're handling this well," she observed, raising her voice above the engine noise. Olivia thought about the years of independence forced upon her by her father's absence, the quiet strength she'd developed while helping her mother hold their small family together. "I've had practice adapting," she replied. As the helicopters carried her toward an uncertain future, Olivia Thompson realized that the line between ordinary and extraordinary wasn't as clear as she had once believed. Sometimes it took a crisis to reveal the hidden truths that had been shaping your life all along. And sometimes The simple act of offering lunch to a stranger could change everything. The military facility materialized from the wilderness like a mirage, its perimeter marked by chain-link fencing and surveillance equipment, nearly invisible against the mountainous terrain. 3 hours had passed since Olivia's extraction from Jefferson High, 3 hours of flight over landscapes that gradually transformed from familiar suburbs to rugged wilderness. The Black Hawk descended toward a helipad where figures in military uniforms stood waiting with the disciplined stillness of those accustomed to extraordinary circumstances becoming routine. Agent Chun's hand on Olivia's shoulder steadied her. As the helicopter touched down, "Stay close to me," she instructed, her voice carrying over the diminishing rotor noise. "There are people here who've waited a long time to meet you." The wounded officer had been transferred to a medical helicopter during a brief refueling stop, his departure marked by a thumbs up that somehow made the situation more real than the gunfire had. Now, as Olivia stepped onto the concrete helipad, the reality of her transformed circumstances settled fully upon her shoulders. "Welcome to Alpine Station," a gray-haired officer greeted them, his insignia identifying him as a colonel. "Miss Thompson, I'm Colonel Hargrove. We've been expecting you, though not quite under these circumstances." Olivia's response was interrupted by a familiar voice calling her name. She turned to see her mother rushing across the tarmac, face streaked with dried tears and relief. The collision of their embrace knocked the breath from Olivia's lungs. "Mom, are you okay?" they said. "I'm fine, baby." "I'm fine." Her mother's hands cradled Olivia's face, examining her as if searching for injuries. "They told me what happened at the school. The shooting. I'm okay too," Olivia assured her, though the memory of gunfire still echoed in her mind. "But Dad..." "Mom, they showed me a picture. They said he's alive, that he's been working secretly all this time." The accusation in her voice was unmistakable, directed not at her absent father, but at the woman who had let her believe he was gone forever. Her mother's expression crumpled, then steadied, years of practiced composure briefly fracturing before reconstructing itself. "It was his decision, Olivia, for our safety, for the mission. I wanted to tell you so many times, but..." "Miss Thompson, Mrs. Thompson," Colonel Hargrove interrupted gently. "We should continue this conversation inside. Our perimeter is secure, but we prefer not to linger in open spaces given the current situation." The facility's interior was a stark contrast to its rugged exterior, state-of-the-art technology humming behind reinforced walls, personnel moving with purposeful efficiency through corridors that branched like arteries from the central command hub. Olivia and her mother were escorted to a conference room where refreshments had been arranged with military precision. "Please help yourselves," Colonel Hargrove offered, gesturing to the food. "Agent Chun will brief you on the situation while we prepare for the secure video conference." Olivia studied her mother as they sat beside each other at the polished table. Elizabeth Thompson had always been a pillar of quiet strength, raising a daughter alone while working full-time as a high school English teacher, never complaining about the hand life had dealt her. Now Olivia realized her mother had been carrying an even heavier burden than she'd known, the secret of her husband's continued existence, the daily act of deception performed out of duty rather than choice. "You knew all along," Olivia stated, the words heavy between them. Her mother nodded, eyes fixed on her untouched glass of water. "Not at first. For the first 6 months, I believed what everyone else did, that he'd abandoned us. Then they contacted me, explained that his skills were needed for a critical operation, that his previous identity had to be completely severed for the mission to succeed." She finally looked up, meeting Olivia's gaze. "And that any contact with us would put both him and us in danger." "What skills?" Olivia demanded. "Dad was an engineering consultant. He designed water treatment systems for developing countries." A sad smile crossed her mother's face. "That was part of his cover, honey. Your father is one of the world's foremost experts on identifying and neutralizing biological weapons. Those water treatment systems were actually monitoring stations for detecting potential bioweapon development. The revelation landed like a stone in still water, ripples of understanding expanding outward through Olivia's consciousness. Small inconsistencies in her childhood memories suddenly aligned: her father's irregular work schedule, the international calls that required privacy, the visitors who didn't quite match their stated professions. Did he ever actually care about us? The question escaped before Olivia could contain it, raw and wounded. Her mother's response was immediate and fierce. Every day, every single day. Do you remember how he taught you to play chess when you were just 5? How he would spend hours explaining scientific concepts when you asked questions? The reason you're so good at math and science isn't just natural talent, Olivia. It's because your father poured everything he knew into you during the time he had. Agent Chun entered before Olivia could respond, accompanied by a technician, carrying equipment for the video conference. "We're ready to begin the briefing," she announced, her professional demeanor softening slightly at the obvious tension between mother and daughter. "I know this is a lot to process, but the situation has escalated, and we need to bring you both up to speed quickly." The lights dimmed as a screen descended from the ceiling. Colonel Hargrove returned with 2 additional officers, who introduced themselves as intelligence specialists. The technician's fingers flew across a keyboard, establishing connections through layers of security protocols. "Before we begin," Agent Chun addressed Olivia directly, "I want to acknowledge that this information would normally be classified well beyond civilian access. The extraordinary circumstances of today's events have necessitated bringing you into a very restricted circle of knowledge. Everything you see and hear in this room falls under the National Security Act." The screen flickered to life, displaying a map with pinpoint markers scattered across the Middle East and Eastern Europe. "Operation Watchwater began 8 years ago," Chun continued, "when intelligence identified a pattern of suspicious research facilities being established in regions with limited oversight and abundant water resources." Colonel Hargrove picked up the narrative. "We needed someone who could move through these regions without arousing suspicion, an expert who could pose as a humanitarian consultant while actually gathering intelligence on potential bioweapon development. Your father's academic background made him the perfect candidate." 6 years ago, Agent Chun continued, "the operation uncovered evidence that a consortium of non-state actors was attempting to develop a weaponized pathogen using regional water supplies for both development and potential distribution. Your father's team infiltrated their network, establishing himself as a resource they wanted to recruit." The map zoomed in on a region in northern Syria where one marker pulsed red. "This is where your father has been primarily based for the past 3 years. His cover identity has allowed him to map the entire operation from the inside, identifying key personnel, facilities, and research progress." Olivia's mind raced to process the information. The father she remembered discussing rainwater collection systems over dinner was actually working to prevent biological warfare. The man who had taught her to ride a bike was now embedded with terrorists developing weapons of mass destruction. 2 months ago, Colonel Hargrove said gravely, "Your father discovered that the group was preparing for the final testing phase of their weapon. He managed to sabotage critical components and transmit the formula to our analysts, who confirmed it would have been catastrophic if deployed. This action compromised his position within the organization." The screen changed to show surveillance photographs of several men in civilian clothing. "These individuals are members of a retrieval team sent to locate and either capture or eliminate your father. Intelligence suggests they discovered his true identity approximately 3 weeks ago. And they found us," Olivia's mother whispered, the implications clarifying in her expression. "That's why the school—" "Yes," Agent Chun confirmed. The man posing as Sergeant Reeves was almost certainly confirming Olivia's identity before a planned abduction. They would have used her as leverage to force your husband to surrender himself and provide the corrections to his sabotage. The screen changed again, this time showing a grainy photograph of a man hurrying across an airfield toward a waiting helicopter. Even with the poor quality and distance, Olivia recognized her father. This was taken 18 hours ago in Turkey. Colonel Hargrove explained, "Your father is currently en route to a secure rendezvous point. If all goes according to plan, he will arrive here within the next 12 hours. The weight of 6 years of absence, of unanswered questions and missed milestones, compressed into the simple statement, he will arrive here." Olivia felt her mother's hand grasp hers beneath the table, their fingers interlocking in a gesture that conveyed both support and a shared trepidation about the impending reunion. "What happens then?" Olivia asked, finding her voice. "After he gets here." The officers exchanged glances, a silent communication that spoke of complications not yet shared. "That depends on several factors," Colonel Hargrove replied carefully. "The immediate threat to your family necessitates a comprehensive security response. There are protocols for situations like this." "Witness protection," Olivia's mother stated flatly. "New identities, new location, new lives, again." Agent Chun nodded. "That's one possibility. The other depends on whether we can neutralize the threat completely in the coming days. If the retrieval team can be captured and the leadership structure of the consortium dismantled, a return to normal life might be possible, with certain security measures in place." Normal life. The phrase seemed to hover in the air, its meaning transformed by the day's revelations. What was normal when your father was a secret operative? When your school had been targeted by international terrorists? When helicopters evacuated you from the football field while snipers fired from the tree line? "I'm supposed to submit my early decision application to MIT next week," Olivia said, the ordinary concern feeling absurdly out of place in the high-security briefing room. "And Mom has parent-teacher conferences on Thursday." A ghost of a smile crossed Agent Chun's face. "We'll make arrangements for your application, Ms. Thompson. Education continuity is part of our protocols for families in your situation." The smile faded as she continued, "But I'm afraid your mother's conferences will need to be handled by substitutes for the foreseeable future." The briefing continued with security protocols, facility orientation, and the establishment of communication channels for updates. Olivia absorbed the information with the same methodical approach she applied to complex calculus problems, compartmentalizing the emotional impact to focus on the logical components. By the time they were escorted to their assigned quarters, adjoining rooms with basic but comfortable furnishings, her mind was overflowing with new information that refused to arrange itself into a coherent narrative. "You should try to rest," her mother suggested as they inspected their temporary home. "It's been an impossible day." Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly aware of the absurdity of having no belongings except her school backpack rescued during the evacuation. "I don't even have pajamas," she said, laughter bubbling up unexpectedly. "I was worried about calculus this morning. And now I'm in a secret military base waiting for my not actually missing father to arrive from Syria." Her mother sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Life can change in an instant, honey. Sometimes all we can do is adapt." She hesitated, then added, "I know you're angry that I kept this from you. You have every right to be. But please believe that every day of deception was agony. Watching you grieve for a father who wasn't dead, seeing you struggle with abandonment. That wasn't real. It broke my heart over and over." "Did you ever get to talk to him all these years?" Olivia asked, leaning into her mother's familiar warmth. "Twice, brief, monitored calls on secure lines when the operation allowed it." Her voice softened with the memory. "He asked about you both times, your grades, your interests, whether you still played chess. I told him how brilliant you are, how resilient. He cried when I told him about your science fair project last year, the water filtration system you designed. Olivia remembered that project, inspired, she had thought, by the father who had abandoned them. The irony that she had been unconsciously following in his actual footsteps, rather than just his remembered ones, wasn't lost on her. I still don't know what I'm supposed to feel about him, about any of this. You feel whatever is true for you, her mother said simply. Anger, confusion, hope, it's all valid. The situation is extraordinary, but your emotions don't have to be sorted into extraordinary categories. They just are what they are. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Agent Chun stood in the hallway, her professional demeanor slightly softened. Sorry to intrude, but I thought you might need these. She handed over a duffel bag. Standard issue comfort kit, clothing, toiletries, some books. The clothes aren't fashionable, but they're clean. Thank you, Olivia's mother said, accepting the bag. Is there any update on my husband's arrival? His transport crossed into friendly airspace 20 minutes ago. Barring complications, he should arrive around 0400. Agent Chun hesitated. Then added, I've arranged for you to have a secure video call with him before landing. The connection will be established in approximately 1 hour, if you'd like to prepare. After she departed, Olivia and her mother stared at each other in stunned silence. 1 hour. After 6 years of absence, Olivia would see her father's face, hear his voice, in just 60 minutes. I need to shower, her mother said suddenly, running her fingers through her disheveled hair, and change. I can't let him see me like this after 6 years. The ordinary concern, wanting to look presentable for her husband, struck Olivia as both absurd and touching. As her mother disappeared into the small bathroom, Olivia unpacked the duffel bag, finding neatly folded standard-issue clothing in approximately their sizes. Beneath the practical items lay 2 paperback books, a thriller for her mother and, surprisingly, a collection of chess strategies that made Olivia wonder how much Agent Chun knew about her family. Changing into the provided clothes, Olivia caught her reflection in the small mirror mounted on the wall. The girl who had left for school that morning, concerned with college applications and calculus, seemed to belong to another lifetime. The person staring back at her now had witnessed gunfire, flown in military helicopters, and learned that her understanding of her own family had been built on carefully constructed deceptions. Yet beneath the extraordinary circumstances, she recognized herself, the determined set of her jaw, the analytical focus in her eyes, the resilience that had carried her through 6 years of believing herself abandoned. These qualities hadn't appeared today. They had been forged over years of adapting to her father's absence. The irony that his disappearance had helped create the strength she now needed to face his return wasn't lost on her. When her mother emerged from the bathroom, hair damp and face scrubbed clean, Olivia recognized the same determination in her expression. They had both been shaped by the same absence, their responses different but complementary, like puzzle pieces formed by the same cutting tool. Ready? Her mother asked, glancing at the clock that showed their hour of preparation nearly elapsed. No, Olivia answered honestly, but let's do it anyway. They were escorted to a secure communications room where a technician made final adjustments to equipment designed to prevent any outside interception. Agent Chun handed them each an earpiece. The connection will be established momentarily. Due to security protocols, we'll remain in the room, but we'll give you as much privacy as possible. The screen remained black for several tense moments, then flickered to life. And suddenly, there he was, Michael Thompson, older and leaner. Then Olivia remembered, his once dark hair now salted with gray, his face weathered by years in harsh environments. He wore nondescript civilian clothing, and the background revealed nothing of his location beyond indistinct metal walls that suggested an aircraft interior. For a moment, no one spoke. 6 years of separation crystallized in a silence that seemed to contain all the words never exchanged, all the moments never shared. "Elizabeth," he finally said, his voice breaking on her mother's name. "Olivia. My God, look at you both." "Michael," her mother whispered, reaching toward the screen before catching herself. Olivia remained silent, studying the face that had lived in her memory as a younger version, trying to reconcile the father she remembered with this stranger who carried his features. "Livy," he said, using the childhood nickname she had almost forgotten. "I know this is impossible to understand. I know you must hate me for—" "I don't hate you," Olivia interrupted, surprising herself with the truth of it. "I don't know you well enough anymore to hate you. You're a stranger who has my father's face." Pain flashed across his features, but he nodded. "That's fair, more than fair. I've missed 6 years of your life, important years. I can't expect to step back into a role I vacated, no matter the reasons. Why didn't you find another way?" The question burst from Olivia with unexpected force. "You're supposed to be this brilliant operative. Why couldn't you figure out how to be our father, too?" Her mother placed a gentle hand on her arm, but Olivia shrugged it off. "No, I want to know. Was the mission really more important than watching your daughter grow up?" Michael Thompson's expression reflected not defense but a deep, weathered sorrow. "No mission is more important than family, Livy, but sometimes the mission is what keeps the family safe." He leaned closer to the camera. "The work I've been doing, it's about preventing weapons that could kill millions. Weapons that could have reached Millfield, reached your school, reached you. Every day I was away from you was a day I was working to ensure you'd have a future to grow into." "That's a convenient rationalization," Olivia replied, the analytical part of her mind recognizing the logical structure of his argument while her emotional core rejected its premise. "It is," he agreed unexpectedly. "It's what I told myself on nights when I couldn't sleep for missing you both. It's what I repeated when I received the rare intelligence packet with photos of you growing up without me. It's how I justified choices that tore me apart. But convenience doesn't make it untrue." A warning from the technician interrupted. They had only a few minutes remaining before the connection would need to be terminated for security reasons. "Listen to me, both of you," Michael said urgently. "What happened today at the school, it changes everything. These people are desperate now. They've invested years and millions in a weapon that's now compromised, and they believe I'm the only one who can salvage their work. They'll use any leverage they can find, including us," Olivia's mother supplied, her hand finding Olivia's again. "Especially you." His face hardened with a determination Olivia recognized from her own mirror reflection. "But I made a promise to myself years ago that all this sacrifice would eventually lead back to you. That one day I'd find a way to be your father again, Livy. Your husband again, Elizabeth. That day is coming soon, one way or another." The technician signaled 1 minute remaining. "I'll be there in a few hours," Michael continued. "We'll figure this out together as a family. For now, trust Agent Chun and Colonel Hargrove. They've been planning for this contingency for years." "Years?" Olivia echoed. "They knew this might happen?" A sad smile crossed her father's face. "In our business, we plan for failure as meticulously as we plan for success. Your safety has always been the priority in both scenarios." His eyes moved between them, as if memorizing their faces. "I have to go. The landing approach requires communication blackout. But I'll see you both soon, for real this time." The screen went dark before either of them could respond, leaving Olivia and her mother staring at their own reflections in the blank monitor. The promise of his physical presence in mere hours hung between them like a bridge not yet tested for structural integrity. As they were escorted back to their quarters, Olivia found herself mentally cataloging the changes in her father's appearance, the new lines around his eyes, The altered timbre of his voice, the efficient economy of his movements that spoke of years operating in dangerous environments. She was building a revised image to replace the frozen memory she had preserved, preparing herself for the reality of reunion after years of absence. "He looks older," her mother said quietly as they reached their rooms. "So do we," Olivia replied, recognizing the obvious truth that they had all been changing during their separation, none of them the people they had been 6 years ago. The question that remained unspoken between them was whether these changed versions of themselves could reconnect, or if too much transformation had occurred in their years apart. As Olivia prepared for sleep in the unfamiliar bed, she found herself mentally reviewing the day's events with the same methodical approach she applied to complex equations. The variables were extraordinary: international conspiracies, biological weapons, covert operations, but the human elements remained familiar: love, absence, duty, connection. Tomorrow would bring her father back physically into her life, but the emotional distance created by 6 years of separation wouldn't disappear. With his arrival, that gap would need to be bridged one conversation, one shared moment, one truth at a time. It would require the same patience and determination she had applied to understanding calculus or mastering chess, disciplines her father had introduced her to before his disappearance. Perhaps that was the most complex equation of all: how the father who had shaped her thinking continued to influence her life even in his absence, preparing her for challenges he couldn't have foreseen, but somehow knew she would face. As sleep finally claimed her, Olivia's last coherent thought was that tomorrow would bring not answers, but the beginning of questions. She was only now learning to formulate questions about identity, duty, forgiveness, and the complex geometry of a family being redefined by forces beyond their control. The rhythmic pulse of helicopter rotors pulled Olivia from a fitful sleep. Her eyes snapped open to the unfamiliar surroundings of the Alpine Station quarters, momentary disorientation giving way to the flood of yesterday's revelations. The digital clock on the nightstand read 3:47 a.m. Her father's transport was arriving ahead of schedule. She slipped from beneath the standard issue blanket, finding her mother already awake and standing by the small window, peering through the blinds at the illuminated helipad visible in the distance. "Is it him?" Olivia asked, moving to stand beside her. Her mother nodded, not trusting her voice. In the harsh glow of the facility's exterior lights, a Black Hawk helicopter was touching down, its silhouette different from those that had evacuated them from Jefferson High. 4 figures disembarked, moving with the coordinated efficiency of longtime teammates rather than the rigid formation of regular military personnel. A sharp knock at their door announced Agent Chun, her appearance suggesting she hadn't slept. "He's here," she confirmed. Unnecessarily. They wanted to brief him first, standard protocol after extraction. But he insisted on seeing you both before anything else. "If you're ready." The walk through the facility's corridors felt dreamlike to Olivia, the fluorescent lighting casting everything in a surreal glow. Her mother walked beside her, shoulders back and chin lifted with the same quiet dignity she had maintained through 6 years of raising a daughter alone while carrying the weight of secrets. They were led to a small conference room different from the one where yesterday's briefing had occurred. This space felt less formal, comfortable chairs arranged around a round table, refreshments set out with thoughtful attention to detail. The military efficiency was evident, but softened with touches of humanity. "Wait here, please," Agent Chun instructed, her tone gentler than her words. "It won't be long." When the door closed behind her, Olivia and her mother stood in silence, neither moving toward the chairs or refreshments. The moment they had both imagined countless times over the years was minutes away, reality preparing to collide with memory. "And imagination, Mom?" Olivia's voice sounded younger than she intended. "What do I call him?" "Dad seems wrong after so long, but Mr. Thompson is worse." Her mother's smile was gentle. Start with hello, the rest will come. The door opened. Without warning, and Michael Thompson stood in the threshold, his presence filling the room instantly. In person, the changes in him were more evident than they had been on the video call. He was leaner, harder, his movements precise in a way that spoke of constant vigilance. But his eyes, when they found Olivia's, were exactly as she remembered. Warm brown with flecks of gold near the pupils, crinkled at the corners when he smiled. No one moved for 3 heartbeats. Then Elizabeth Thompson broke the stalemate, crossing the room to embrace her husband with a fierceness that spoke of years of pent-up emotion. His arms enveloped her immediately, his face buried in her hair. As if anchoring himself to her scent, her solidity, her reality. Olivia remained where she stood, a witness to their reunion rather than a participant. The analytical part of her mind, the part her father had nurtured through childhood lessons. In chess and mathematics, observed the physical changes in him, cataloging differences and similarities. The emotional part struggled to reconcile the father of her memories with this stranger holding her mother. When they finally separated, both wiping tears unashamedly, Michael turned toward his daughter. "Olivia," he said, her full name carrying the weight of reverence. He made no move toward her, respecting the distance she maintained. "I hardly know where to begin." "The beginning might help," she replied, the words emerging more sharply than intended. "Why you left, the real reason, not the classified version." He nodded, accepting the challenge in her tone. "You deserve that, both of you do." He gestured toward the chairs. "May we sit? It's been a long journey." They arranged themselves. Around the table, Michael and Elizabeth side by side, Olivia across from them, a physical representation of the emotional configuration that now existed. Family yet divided, connected yet separated. 8 years ago, Michael began, his voice taking on the cadence of a practiced briefer. "I was approached by intelligence officials who had been monitoring my academic work on water purification systems in conflict zones. They'd identified a pattern of unusual research facilities being established near critical water sources in regions with limited oversight. They needed someone who could move through these areas legitimately while gathering intelligence on potential bioweapon development." He paused, reaching for a glass of water with a hand that showed new scars. Olivia didn't remember. At first, it was supposed to be periodic consulting, a few weeks away, then back home. But the deeper I got, the more critical the intelligence became. We discovered an international consortium developing a weaponized pathogen that could be distributed through municipal water systems, colorless, odorless, and with an incubation period that would allow it to spread globally before detection. "So they pulled you in permanently," Elizabeth supplied, filling the gap in his narrative. "Made you disappear." "Not immediately," Michael corrected gently. "For the first 2 years, I was still able to come home between missions. But then, we identified the core leadership, a mixture of rogue scientists, extremists, and mercenaries with significant resources. They became suspicious of new faces in their periphery." His expression darkened. "They found one of our team members. What they did to him and his family made it clear that any operatives they identified would see their loved ones targeted first." Olivia absorbed this information with the same methodical approach she applied to complex problems, breaking it down into components, examining each piece before reconstructing the whole. "So you didn't leave to protect the mission," she concluded. "You left to protect us." Michael's eyes met hers directly. "The mission was protecting you, Livy. Every water source they contaminated would have affected millions, including the reservoir that supplies Millfield." The implication settled over the table like an invisible weight. Her father hadn't abandoned them for an abstract concept of duty or patriotism. He had removed himself from their lives to ensure they would continue to have lives to live. "Why couldn't you tell us the truth?" Olivia asked, the question directed at both parents. Even if you had to go, why did I have to believe you abandoned us? I was 11, not a baby. Her parents exchanged glances, a silent communication that reminded Olivia they had once been a team, partners in raising her before circumstances forced them into separate roles. That decision wasn't entirely ours, her mother admitted. The intelligence agencies involved had protocols for family separation. Complete information compartmentalization was standard. The less we knew, the safer we would be if questioned or surveilled. But it was ultimately my choice, Michael added, refusing to hide behind bureaucratic requirements. And looking back, it was the wrong one. I thought a clean break would be easier than a half-truth that would leave you watching for my return. I thought your anger at my abandonment would be less painful than constant worry about my safety. His voice roughened with emotion. I was wrong, and that miscalculation has cost us 6 years we can never recover. The admission, straightforward and without excuses, broke through something in Olivia's carefully maintained emotional barriers. This wasn't the evasive explanation of someone justifying their actions, but the honest acknowledgement of a mistake made with good intentions, but devastating consequences. What happens now? She asked, the practical question easier to voice than the emotional one still churning beneath the surface. That depends partly on how the next 72 hours unfold, Michael replied, shifting subtly into the operational mode that had become his primary framework. My extraction has temporarily disrupted their timeline, but they're already regrouping. We've identified most of the retrieval team that targeted you at Jefferson High, but not all. The broader consortium remains active, albeit set back by my sabotage of their research. Agent Chun entered the room with Colonel Hargrove, their timing, suggesting they had been monitoring the reunion from outside. Sorry to interrupt, Chun said, though her tone indicated the interruption was planned rather than spontaneous. We need to brief you all on the security situation and next steps. Colonel Hargrove activated a display screen on the wall, showing a map similar to the one from yesterday's briefing, but with updated markers. The good news is that we've contained the immediate threat to Millfield. Local law enforcement, with discreet federal support, has secured the Thompson residence and Jefferson High School. The operatives who conducted the reconnaissance and attempted abduction have been neutralized or are in custody. And the bad news? Elizabeth asked, her hand finding Michael's on the table. The consortium leadership remains at large, with significant resources, Agent Chun replied. More concerning, our intelligence suggests they've accelerated their timeline for a demonstration event. Michael's expression hardened. They're planning to prove the weapon works, even in its compromised state. Correct, Colonel Hargrove. Confirmed. We believe they'll target a small, isolated water system to demonstrate the pathogen's effectiveness to potential buyers, even though my sabotage reduced its lethality and transmissibility significantly. He turned to address Olivia. Directly, this is where you come in, Ms. Thompson. Olivia blinked in surprise. Me? What could I possibly have to do with bioweapons? Her father answered before the colonel could. The work I sabotaged. It involved complex molecular reconfiguration under specific environmental conditions. The changes I made introduced instabilities. That should prevent mass casualties, but they could potentially be reversed by someone with the right expertise in biochemical engineering. Which you have, Olivia stated, understanding dawning. Yes, and they know that. Michael's gaze remained steady on his daughter. What they don't know is that you've inherited not just my interest in water systems, but my aptitude for molecular engineering as well. Agent Chun brought up a new image on the screen. Olivia's science fair project from the previous year. A water filtration system that had won regional recognition. Your design incorporated principles that demonstrated an intuitive understanding of molecular interaction in water purification. Your father recognized it immediately when we shared intelligence on your academic progress. You've been watching me? Olivia's question emerged sharper than intended, directed at both the officials and her father. "Protecting you, Colonel," Hargrove corrected. "Your safety has been a priority since your father's operation began. We've had personnel at Jefferson High since you enrolled. Teachers, maintenance staff, security." The realization that her normal life had been constantly monitored by invisible guardians sent a chill through Olivia. How many of the adults she interacted with daily were actually there to watch over her? Was kindly Mrs. Winters in the library an intelligence operative? Was Coach Delaney secretly reporting her physical education performance to government handlers? "This is insane," she murmured, the scope of the deception expanding beyond what she could readily process. "Olivia," her father said gently, reclaiming her attention. "Your project last year, it wasn't just good science. It contained innovations that professional engineers haven't developed. You intuited molecular interactions that specialists spend years studying." Pride suffused his voice. "You've got the same instincts for this work that I do, maybe better." "What are you saying?" Elizabeth demanded, maternal protectiveness evident in her tone. "You can't possibly be suggesting we need her expertise," Colonel Hargrove interrupted. "Combined with Michael's knowledge, we believe we can develop a neutralizing agent that would render their weapon completely inert, even if they attempt to reverse the sabotage." "She's 17, Elizabeth protested, rising from her chair. "A high school student, not a counter-bioterrorism specialist." "Mom," Olivia said quietly, the pieces aligning in her analytical mind. "They wouldn't ask if there were alternatives." Michael nodded, his expression pained. "The timeline is too compressed for standard protocols. The demonstration event is planned for 72 hours from now. Even with the best specialists flown in, the learning curve to understand my sabotage methodology would consume most of that time." "But I would understand it faster," Olivia concluded, "because I think like you do." "Yes." Her father's acknowledgement was both confirmation and apology. "Your science fair project showed that you approach molecular problems the same way." "I do, seeing patterns and interactions that others miss. With your help, we could develop a neutralizing agent in time to prevent their demonstration." The weight of the request settled on Olivia's shoulders, not just the technical challenge, but the moral implications. This wasn't a theoretical exercise or an academic competition. Real lives hung in the balance, dependent on her ability to apply her intuitive understanding of molecular engineering to a crisis situation. "If I help," she said slowly, thinking through the implications, "what happens afterward? Do we go into witness protection? Start over somewhere new? Or do I just go back to calculus class and pretend none of this happened?" Agent Chun exchanged glances with Colonel Hargrove before answering. "That depends on the outcome of the next 72 hours. If we're successful in neutralizing both the weapon and the leadership structure of the consortium, a return to something resembling normal life might be possible with certain security measures in place." "And if we're not successful?" Elizabeth asked, voicing the question Olivia had left unspoken. "Then witness protection would be the minimum response," Colonel Hargrove replied gravely. "But failure in this case has implications far beyond your family's safety." Michael reached across the table, his hand extended toward Olivia but not touching her, offering connection without demanding it. "I would understand if you refuse. This isn't your fight, not your responsibility. You didn't ask for any of this." Olivia studied her father's outstretched hand, noting the calluses and scars that hadn't been there 6 years ago, physical evidence of the price he had paid for his choice. She thought about the science fair project that had apparently caught the attention of intelligence analysts, remembering the long nights working through problems that teachers couldn't help her solve, intuiting solutions that seemed to emerge from some deeper understanding she couldn't articulate. She had built that project thinking about the father who had taught her to see patterns in complexity, hoping somehow to connect with the man she believed had abandoned them. The irony that her work had indeed connected them through intelligence. Channels she never knew existed wasn't lost on her. "If I do this," she said finally, "I want something in return." Her father's expression shifted to cautious hope. "Name it." "The truth. All of it. No more sanitized versions or need-to-know restrictions." Olivia's gaze moved between her parents and the intelligence officers. "I want to understand exactly what we're facing and why. And afterward, regardless of the outcome, I want the full story of the past 6 years, what you've been doing, why it mattered, how it affected people." Michael glanced at Colonel Hargrove, who gave a measured nod. "We can accommodate that request within security parameters." "No," Olivia insisted, "not within parameters. Complete transparency. I'm not asking for classified operational details or identities of other agents. I'm asking for the human truth, what this mission cost, what it achieved, why it mattered. Enough to sacrifice our family for it." Her father's expression softened with something like respect. "That I can promise without any qualifications. You deserve to understand why these years were lost to us. Why the choice, painful as it was, had to be made." Olivia finally reached across the table to take his offered hand, not in forgiveness or absolution, but in agreement to a new contract between them. No longer father and child in the simple sense, but partners in a shared purpose that transcended traditional family roles. "Then I'll help," she decided. "Show me what we're dealing with." The next hours passed in a blur of technical briefings, laboratory orientations, and compressed tutorials on biochemical agents that would have constituted graduate-level course under normal circumstances. Olivia absorbed the information with the focused intensity she usually reserved for challenging academic competitions, her mind cataloging molecular structures and interaction pathways with an intuitive grasp that visibly impressed the scientific specialists called in to support the effort. Her father worked beside her, their intellectual synchronicity becoming apparent as they developed a shorthand for complex concepts that sometimes left the other scientists struggling to follow their rapid exchanges. This shared aptitude, the ability to see patterns in molecular chaos, to intuit relationships between seemingly unrelated components, created a bridge between them that 6 years of absence couldn't fully erode. "You approach problems exactly the way I do," Michael observed during a rare break, watching as Olivia sketched a molecular interaction on a whiteboard. "Looking for the hidden connections first, then building outward from there." "Mom always said I got my stubbornness from you," Olivia replied, focused on her diagram rather than the emotional weight of the observation. "Guess I got your weird brain too." A small smile touched his lips. "Not weird. Just differently patterned. Most people see linear relationships, cause and effect in sequence. We see webs of interaction, multiple pathways, possibilities branching from each node." He gestured toward her diagram. "It's why you've already grasped what took me years to understand about molecular binding in water-based solutions." Olivia paused, marker hovering over the whiteboard. "Is that why they chose you for this mission? Not just your expertise, but how your mind works?" "Partly," he acknowledged. "The consortium scientists approach problems conventionally, methodical, linear, building on established research. They never expected someone who could look at their work and see the unconventional vulnerabilities, the non-standard interaction points where sabotage would be most effective. And hardest to detect," Olivia added, understanding dawning. "You didn't just damage their research. You introduced flaws that looked like natural limitations of the approach they were using." "Exactly," pride colored his voice. "They've spent months trying to overcome what they think are inherent constraints in the molecular structure, never realizing those constraints were deliberately introduced." This glimpse into her father's operational methodology, the elegant subtlety of his sabotage, the intelligence that had guided it, helped Olivia understand him in ways that conventional father-daughter conversations might never have achieved. She was seeing not just the parent who had taught her chess and science, but the brilliant operative whose unique cognitive approach made him invaluable in a high-stakes international game. As they worked through the night and into the following day, Elizabeth Thompson became their anchor to practicality, ensuring they ate, reminding them to rest briefly, translating their increasingly esoteric discussions into terms the military personnel could understand and act upon. Her role as facilitator revealed another dimension of the family dynamic that had existed before Michael's disappearance, his intellectual flights balanced by her grounded pragmatism, creating a functional partnership that extended beyond their marriage into their professional interaction. By the 36-hour mark, Olivia and her father had developed a theoretical model for a neutralizing agent that could render the consortium's bioweapon inert, even if they managed to reverse some of Michael's original sabotage. The remaining challenge was production and deployment, getting the neutralizing agent into the water system the consortium had targeted for their demonstration. "We've identified 3 possible locations for the demonstration event," Colonel Hargrove announced during the briefing that followed their breakthrough. "Small, isolated communities with limited outside monitoring of their water supply. We're deploying preventative measures to all 3, but our intelligence suggests this location is most probable." The map on the screen highlighted a small town in the mountains of Eastern Europe, remote, economically depressed, and strategically unimportant enough that an unexplained health crisis might not immediately attract international attention. "The neutralizing agent needs to be introduced at the primary treatment facility," Michael explained, indicating the location on the map. "It's designed to bond with the pathogen molecules, rendering them inert without affecting potability or introducing any detectable taste or color changes. Our challenge," Agent Chun continued, "is deploying the agent without alerting the consortium that we've identified their target. If they detect our preventative measures, they'll simply choose another location, one we haven't identified." The implication hung in the air. They would get one chance at this. If they failed, people would die as part of a demonstration designed to market a weapon of mass destruction to potential buyers. "What about a covert introduction?" Olivia suggested, the solution emerging from her analytical assessment of the problem. "Something that looks like routine maintenance or regular chemical treatment." Colonel Hargrove nodded approvingly. "That's precisely our approach. We have operatives preparing to enter the facility disguised as water treatment specialists conducting standard maintenance. The neutralizing agent will be introduced as part of normal chemical balancing procedures." The plan's elegance appealed to Olivia's sense of pattern and purpose, countering the consortium's deception with their own, using the systems designed for public health to prevent a deliberate attack on that same public. It was chess played with molecules instead of pieces, anticipating the opponent's strategy and positioning a defense they wouldn't detect until their attack had already been neutralized. As the briefing concluded and the operational teams departed to implement the plan, Olivia found herself alone with her parents for the first time since their work began. The shared purpose that had driven their intensive collaboration gave way to the more complicated reality of their personal relationship, a family fractured by years of separation, now tentatively reconnecting through crisis. "You've done remarkable work," Michael said, breaking the silence that had settled over them. "Better than I could have hoped for. You've saved lives today, Livy." "We don't know that yet," Olivia replied, the caution in her voice reflecting the scientific precision that had guided their work. "Not until the neutralizing agent is deployed and the consortium makes their attempt. But we've given those people a fighting chance they wouldn't have had otherwise," her mother added gently. "That matters regardless of the outcome." Olivia nodded, acknowledging the truth in this assessment. They had done everything possible within the compressed timeline, applying their combined expertise to a challenge that would have defeated most specialized teams with far greater resources. Whether it would be enough remained to be seen, but the effort itself represented something profound, not just scientific collaboration, but family legacy expressed through shared purpose. "What happens after this is over?" she asked, the question encompassing more than operational next steps. "To us, I mean, to our family." Her parents exchanged glances, a silent communication that Olivia recognized from childhood, the look they had shared when deciding how to address difficult questions or unexpected challenges. "That depends partly on the operational outcome," Michael acknowledged, "but also on what we want to build from here. I can't reclaim the years I've lost with you, Livy. I can't undo the pain my absence caused. But I can be present from this point forward, if you'll allow it." "In what capacity?" Olivia pressed, needing specificity rather than vague assurances. "Are you coming home, resuming your cover identity, or disappearing into another operation?" "My field operations are finished," her father stated with certainty. "The extraction was always planned as my final mission. What comes next is transitioning to an advisory role, using my expertise to guide others rather than operating directly in the field." "And that means?" Elizabeth prompted, clearly having wondered the same thing herself. "It means coming home," Michael said simply. "Or establishing a new home, depending on the security assessment. It means being present, being visible, being your husband and Olivia's father in more than just biology or memory." His gaze moved between them. "If that's what you both want." The question hung in the air between them, not just whether. They wanted him back in their lives, but whether the people they had become in his absence could form a family with the person he had become during the same period. They were all changed by the years apart, shaped by different experiences and challenges. "I don't know yet," Olivia admitted honestly. "I need time to process all of this. To get to know who you are now, not just who you were in my memories or who you've been during this crisis." Her father nodded, accepting this measured response without visible disappointment. "That's fair. More than fair. We have time now, something we haven't had for 6 years. We can use it to rediscover each other, to build new connections based on who we are today rather than who we were." Elizabeth reached for both their hands, creating a physical connection between the three of them. "We've always been a family," she said quietly, "even when we were separated by circumstances and secrets. That foundation still exists, even if the structure we build on it needs to be different than before." As Olivia felt the warmth of her parents' hands in hers, she realized that the simple act of giving lunch to a quiet soldier had set in motion not just an international security operation, but a personal transformation more profound than she could have imagined. The family that had been fractured by duty and deception was finding its way toward a new configuration, not erasing the past, but incorporating it into a future defined by choice rather than circumstance. The path forward wouldn't be simple or straightforward. There would be adjustments and awkward moments, discoveries and disappointments. But for the first time in 6 years, that path existed as more than a theoretical possibility. It had become a tangible option, illuminated by the truth they had finally shared and the purpose they had discovered together. And in that moment, surrounded by the remnants of their intensive work and the presence of the parents who had each shaped her in different ways, Olivia Thompson recognized that sometimes the greatest acts of heroism weren't dramatic rescues or cinematic confrontations, but the quiet courage to reconnect, to forgive, to build something new from the fragments of what had been broken. The operations center at Alpine Station hummed with focused energy as the countdown clock displayed the final hours before the consortium's planned demonstration. Screens around the room showed satellite imagery, communications intercepts, and status reports from field teams positioned near each potential target. Olivia stood between her parents, watching the coordinated effort with a mixture of awe and trepidation. This wasn't a science competition or academic exercise, but a real-world crisis with lives hanging in the balance. Neutralizing agent. Deployment confirmed at Site Alpha, announced a communications specialist, her voice carrying across the room. Chemical integration complete and undetected. Colonel Hargrove nodded in acknowledgement. Status on sites Bravo and Charlie? Deployment teams in position at both locations, awaiting final intelligence confirmation before proceeding. The strategy they had developed relied on perfect timing, introducing the neutralizing agent developed by Olivia and her father shortly before the consortium's planned contamination, but not so early that routine testing might detect the addition. It was a delicate balance, with countless variables that could disrupt their carefully calibrated response. New intelligence intercept from surveillance team, another analyst called out. Confirmation of transport movement towards Site Alpha. Estimated arrival in 3 hours. A collective tensing rippled through the room, their primary theory confirmed. The small mountain community in Eastern Europe would indeed be the consortium's demonstration target, its isolated water system about to become the proving ground for a weapon designed to kill thousands and terrorize millions. "We were right," Michael murmured, his shoulder touching Olivia's in a gesture that felt both protective and collegial. "They're sticking to their original timeline despite the setbacks." Olivia nodded, mentally reviewing the molecular composition of their neutralizing agent one more time. The agent should be fully dispersed through their system by now. Even if they introduce the pathogen at multiple points, we've covered all possible entry locations. "Now we wait," Elizabeth said quietly, giving voice to the tension that filled the room. The next hours would reveal whether their countermeasures were sufficient, whether the combined expertise of father and daughter had created a shield strong enough to protect an unsuspecting community from becoming a statistic in a horrific marketing demonstration. As the operations team monitored the situation, Olivia and her parents were ushered to a small conference room adjacent to the main center, close enough to receive updates, but removed from the immediate operational pressure. The respite offered their first real opportunity to process the whirlwind of events that had transformed their lives in less than 72 hours. "Whatever happens next," Michael said as they settled around the table, "I want you both to know how extraordinary you've been through all of this. Most families would have collapsed under this kind of pressure." Elizabeth smiled wryly. "Most families don't include a covert operative and a teenage molecular engineering prodigy." "We're hardly a typical case study," Olivia agreed, the observation drawing unexpected laughter from all three of them, a moment of shared humor that cut through the accumulated tension like sunshine through storm clouds. As their laughter subsided, Michael's expression grew more serious. "Livy, there's something I've wanted to tell you since I first saw your science fair project. Something I couldn't share until now." Olivia raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the shift in his tone. "What is it?" "The work you did, developing a water filtration system that could remove specific molecular contaminants while preserving beneficial minerals. It wasn't just impressive for a high school project. It was a breakthrough that professional engineers have been attempting for years." "That's why you recognized its significance," Olivia surmised. "Because it related to your field work." "More than related," Michael confirmed. "Your design approached the problem from an angle I'd never considered, looking at molecular binding properties as selective rather than universal. When I saw your project documentation, I immediately adapted your approach to my sabotage methodology." The implication settled over Olivia slowly. Her science fair project, created partly as a way to feel connected to the father she believed had abandoned them, had actually provided him with critical insights for his mission. Their minds had been working in parallel without either knowing it, connected by shared intuition despite physical separation. "So in a way," she said carefully, "I've been helping you all along without even knowing it." "Yes," her father confirmed. Your thinking helped shape my approach, which is why we were able to work so effectively together these past 2 days. Our minds approach problems the same way, seeing patterns and connections that others miss. Elizabeth watched this exchange with a soft expression, witnessing the intellectual bond between father and daughter strengthening despite the years of separation. You've always been more alike than either of you realized, she observed. Even when you were little, Olivia, you would solve puzzles the same way your father did, starting with the patterns rather than the edges. This glimpse of their shared history, the connection that had persisted even during their years apart, created a bridge between past and present that felt both comforting and bittersweet. They had lost so much time, so many moments of discovery and collaboration, yet the fundamental connection between them had remained intact, awaiting rediscovery. The moment was interrupted by Agent Chen entering with an update. We have confirmation that consortium operatives have accessed the water treatment facility at Site Alpha, she reported. They're disguised as maintenance personnel conducting routine chemical treatment. Just as we anticipated, Michael noted, professional focus immediately replacing the personal conversation. How long until we know if the neutralizing agent is working? They've introduced their compound into the primary treatment tank, Chun continued. Based on the timeline you provided, we should see results, or lack thereof, within 6 to 8 hours. Their demonstration protocol involves monitoring hospital admissions and emergency services for the target symptoms. And our monitoring? Elizabeth asked, the protective concern in her voice extending beyond her family to the community unknowingly caught in this international shadow war. We have medical teams disguised as public health researchers in the area, Chun assured. Plus remote monitoring of their emergency services communications and hospital intake systems. If anyone shows symptoms, we'll know immediately and can intervene with the treatment protocol you developed. The precautions were thorough. Yet Olivia couldn't shake the weight of responsibility that had settled on her shoulders. The neutralizing agent bore her intellectual fingerprints alongside her father's. Its success or failure would reflect their combined expertise, their shared approach to a problem with life or death consequences. What about the consortium operatives? She asked, thinking through the broader implications. Even if the pathogen is neutralized, they'll still be out there, capable of trying again elsewhere. Chun and Michael exchanged glances, a silent communication that suggested aspects of the operation not previously shared. We have a secondary team tracking the operatives, Chun explained carefully. Once they leave the water treatment facility, they'll be followed to their rendezvous point, where we hope to identify higher-level members of the consortium leadership, Michael added. This demonstration event involves more than just field technicians. Decision-makers will want confirmation of results, especially after the setbacks my sabotage caused. The strategy's elegant complexity impressed Olivia, using the consortium's own demonstration as an opportunity to trace their operational structure, to follow the field team back to the leaders who remained shadows despite years of intelligence gathering. The neutralizing agent wasn't just protecting an unsuspecting community. It was creating the conditions for dismantling the entire network. That's why timing was so critical, she realized aloud. You needed them to proceed with the demonstration, to commit fully to the operation so they would expose their communication channels and command structure. Exactly, her father confirmed, pride evident in his voice. If we'd simply prevented their access to the water system, they would have disappeared, regrouped, and tried again elsewhere, potentially somewhere we hadn't identified. This way, we neutralized the immediate threat while positioning ourselves to eliminate the source. The hours that followed unfolded with excruciating slowness, each update from the field teams adding pieces to a puzzle still taking shape. The consortium operatives had completed their task at the water treatment facility and departed, followed discreetly by surveillance teams. Hospital monitoring showed no unusual admissions, no spike in emergency calls reporting symptoms that would indicate exposure to the pathogen. "It's working," Elizabeth murmured as the 6-hour mark passed without incident. "Your neutralizing agent is protecting them." Michael squeezed her hand, his expression reflecting cautious optimism. "So far, but the consortium won't accept failure easily. They'll be looking for explanations, running diagnostics, checking their methodology." "Which is exactly what we want," Agent Chun added as she returned with Colonel Hargrove. "Their confusion creates opportunities for us to track communication and command decisions. Every message they send trying to understand what went wrong reveals more about their organizational structure." The colonel's expression carried the gravity of someone balancing multiple critical operations simultaneously. "We've identified a gathering of high-level consortium members at a location near the Austrian-Czech border. Intelligence suggests they're meeting to discuss the demonstration failure and determine next steps." The neutralizing agent worked. "Then?" Olivia asked, seeking explicit confirmation of what the absence of symptoms strongly suggested. "Completely," Hargrove confirmed with a nod of respect toward Olivia and her father. "Field analysis shows no trace of active pathogen in the water system. Whatever they introduced was rendered inert upon contact with your compound, exactly as you predicted." The relief that washed through Olivia was profound, not just pride in their scientific achievement, but the deeper satisfaction of knowing that people would continue their lives unaware of the threat that had been silently neutralized. Children would go to school, parents would go to work, families would gather for meals, ordinary moments preserved by extraordinary intervention. "What happens now?" Elizabeth asked, her practical nature focusing on next steps rather than celebration. "We're coordinating with international partners for a synchronized operation to apprehend the leadership gathering and field teams simultaneously," Hargrove explained. "The goal is to dismantle the entire network before they can regroup or destroy evidence." Michael's expression revealed the complexity of his feelings. The mission he had dedicated 6 years to was approaching its culmination, but its completion would fundamentally change his reality again. "And after that?" he asked, the question encompassing far more than operational details. Colonel Hargrove's answer was measured, acknowledging both the professional and personal dimensions of the situation. "Assuming the operation succeeds, we'll move to the extraction and reintegration phase. Your family security situation will be reassessed based on how completely we're able to neutralize the threat." "Meaning what exactly?" Olivia pressed, needing clarity rather than bureaucratic phrasing. "Do we go home? Go into witness protection? Start over somewhere new?" "That depends on the operational outcome," Chun replied, her tone gentler than her words. "Best case scenario, if we capture the entire leadership structure and their research materials, you could potentially return to a version of your previous lives, with certain security measures in place. And worst case?" Elizabeth asked, her hand finding Olivia's under the table. "Relocation and new identities," Hargrove stated plainly. "But even in that scenario, you would remain together as a family. That much we can guarantee. Together as a family." The phrase resonated with Olivia in unexpected ways. 3 days ago, family had meant just her and her mother, their quiet life in Millfield, shaped by the absence they had learned to navigate. Now it potentially meant something entirely different. A reconfigured unit, including the father who had been a ghost for 6 years. Their relationships necessarily transformed by separation and secrets. "Whatever happens," Michael said quietly, addressing his wife and daughter rather than the intelligence officers, "we face it together from now on. I've missed too much already. I won't miss whatever comes next." The commitment in his voice carried the weight of a vow, not just to be physically present, but emotionally available in ways his mission had prevented for years. Olivia recognized the cost such a promise carried for someone who had lived in the shadows for so long, constantly compartmentalizing, always vigilant. The joint operation is scheduled to commence in 4 hours. Colonel Hargrove continued, returning to operational details. I suggest you all get some rest while you can. We'll brief you on the outcome as soon as we have confirmation. After the intelligence officers departed, the Thompson family remained in the conference room, existing in a strange liminal space between crisis and resolution. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but the broader danger remained until the consortium leadership was apprehended. Their future hung in the balance, dependent on operational outcomes they could no longer influence directly. Chess? Michael suggested, nodding toward a set on a side table that had been provided during their earlier wait. It might help pass the time. The invitation carried echoes of Olivia's childhood, weekend mornings spent across the chessboard from her father, learning strategy and pattern recognition through the movement of pieces across 64 squares. Those lessons had shaped her thinking in ways that extended far beyond the game itself, influencing her approach to everything from mathematics to personal relationships. I should warn you, she said as they set up the board, I'm not the same player you remember. I joined the chess club at Jefferson. Made it to state finals last year. A smile touched her father's lips. I wouldn't expect anything less. Your mind always saw patterns before I could teach them to you. He gestured toward the board. White or black? Black, Olivia decided, choosing the responsive position rather than the initiative, a symbolic choice reflecting her current emotional stance, willing to engage but not yet ready to lead their reconnection. Elizabeth watched them begin the game, the familiar ritual creating a bubble of normalcy within the extraordinary circumstances. The parallels weren't lost on any of them, a strategic contest unfolding on the board while a much larger operation. Prepared to move against the consortium, pieces positioning for advantage, sacrifices calculated for maximum effect, victory dependent on anticipating the opponent's response. The game progressed with an intensity that reflected both their shared history and their separate evolutions, Michael playing with the disciplined approach Olivia remembered, but encountering strategies and responses he hadn't taught her. Her development as a player during his absence became a tangible representation of her growth in all areas, a demonstration that she had continued building on the foundation he provided, even when he wasn't there to guide her. Check, Olivia, announced after a particularly complex exchange left her bishop threatening Michael's king. He studied the board with an appraising eye. Impressive. I didn't see that coming. That's because it's not a standard approach, she explained. I developed it playing against the chess program at school. The computer never expects a Phaeton material for positional advantage 3 moves later. You've always thought beyond conventional patterns, Michael observed, making his defensive move. It's what made you invaluable these past few days, seeing solutions where standard approaches would fail. The game continued, their moves becoming a form of communication. More fluent than their still careful conversation, revealing thinking patterns, risk tolerance, adaptability. Elizabeth occasionally commented or asked questions, her perspective offering a counterpoint to their intensely analytical exchange. When Agent Chun returned 4 hours later, they were deep into their third game, the score tied at 1 victory each. Her expression immediately told them the operation had unfolded successfully. We got them, she confirmed. 17 high-level consortium members apprehended at the leadership gathering, plus 8 field operatives tracked from the demonstration site. International partners have secured 3 research facilities identified through intelligence gathered. During the operation, the news washed through the room like a cleansing tide, carrying away tension accumulated over days of crisis and years of hidden threat. Michael closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the culmination of work that had consumed 6 years of his life and separated him from everyone he loved. And their research materials? He asked, the scientist in him needing confirmation that the threat had been completely neutralized. Secured, Chun assured him. including the original pathogen samples and development notes. Preliminary assessment suggests your sabotage was even more effective than we realized. They were further from a viable weapon than they believed. Elizabeth released a breath she seemed to have been holding for days. So it's over? Truly. Over? The immediate threat is neutralized, Chun confirmed. The long-term security assessment is still ongoing, but Colonel Hargrove wanted me to inform you that initial recommendations are favoring a limited protection protocol rather than complete identity reassignment. Meaning? Olivia prompted. Meaning the implications spelled out clearly. Meaning you may be able to return to something resembling your previous lives, with certain security measures and monitoring in place, Chun explained. The final determination will take a few days, but the operational success significantly improves your options. The possibility of returning to Millfield, to Jefferson High, to the life she had been building before a quiet soldier appeared in the library struck Olivia with unexpected force. That normal existence had seemed irretrievably lost when the helicopters circled her school. Yet now it might be reclaimed, altered by new awareness, but fundamentally intact. What about my father? She asked, the question at the heart of whatever came next. Where does he fit in this resemblance of our previous lives? Michael watched her carefully, understanding the real question beneath the operational inquiry, not just where he would be physically, but what role he would play in their reconfigured family. That's partly a security question, Chen acknowledged, but also a personal one that your family will need to address privately. She excused herself tactfully, promising to return with updates as the situation developed further. When they were alone again, the Thompson family faced the question that had been temporarily displaced by immediate crisis: how to rebuild relationships fractured by years of absence and deception. The operational success had created space for this more personal challenge, removing the external threat that had dominated their interactions since Olivia gave her lunch to a quiet soldier. I know it's not simple, Michael began, addressing the unspoken tension. I can't just step back into the life I left 6 years ago. Too much has changed. You've both changed, built lives that don't include me. It's not about including or excluding you, Elizabeth replied thoughtfully. It's about creating something new that honors both what we had and what we've become since then. We can't pretend the separation didn't happen, but we can choose how it shapes whatever comes next. Olivia considered her parents' words, appreciating their willingness to acknowledge the complexity rather than imposing simplistic solutions. I keep thinking about chess, she said finally. How the game changes when pieces are removed and reintroduced. The board is the same, but the strategic landscape is completely altered. Michael nodded, understanding the metaphor immediately. And new possibilities emerged that didn't exist in the original configuration. Exactly, Olivia continued, warming to the analogy. We're not trying to recreate the game as it was before. We're playing the position we have now, with all its challenges and opportunities. The perspective shift felt significant, framing their situation not as a damaged version of their former family, but as a new configuration with its own potential. The years of separation couldn't be erased, but they could be incorporated into a strengthened structure rather than remaining a permanent fracture. Whatever form our family takes, Elizabeth said, reaching for both their hands across the chessboard, the foundation remains. We've proven that these past few days, working together despite everything, finding common purpose even after years apart. As Olivia's fingers intertwined with her parents, she realized that the simple act of giving her lunch to a quiet soldier hadn't just triggered an international security operation, it had created the conditions for healing. Wounds that had been festering beneath the surface of her ordinary life. The crisis had forced truth into the open, breaking through barriers of secrecy and separation that might otherwise have remained indefinitely. 3 days earlier, she had been a high school senior focused on college applications and calculus. Homework, her family history, a closed book of abandonment and unanswered questions. Now she stood at the threshold of a future informed by fuller understanding of her father's choices, her mother's sacrifice, and her own inherited gifts that had proven crucial when lives hung in the balance. The debriefing process stretched over the following days, each session filling in pieces of the puzzle that had shaped their lives for 6 years. Olivia learned about her father's work in granular detail, the risks he had taken, the lives he had saved, the constant balance between mission requirements and personal longing for the family he had left behind. These revelations didn't erase the pain of his absence, but they provided context that transformed her understanding of what had been lost and why. 1 week after the helicopters had circled Jefferson High, Colonel Hargrove delivered the final security assessment. Based on the comprehensive neutralization of the consortium leadership and research infrastructure, we've determined that limited protection protocols will be sufficient going forward, he announced to the Thompson family gathered in his office. What exactly does limited protection mean in practical terms? Elizabeth asked, her teacher's precision seeking clarity beneath bureaucratic terminology. You'll be able to return to Millfield if you choose, with discreet security monitoring and regular check-ins, Hargrove explained. Michael's status will transition from deep cover operative to technical consultant, allowing him to establish a visible professional identity while continuing to contribute his expertise to ongoing counter-proliferation efforts. The possibilities implicit in this determination expanded before them. A chance to rebuild their family life, not in hiding or under completely new identities, but in a modified version of the community they already knew. Olivia could finish her senior year at Jefferson, complete her college applications, graduate with the classmates who had witnessed her extraordinary departure, but would never know the full story behind it. What will people be told about what happened? She asked, thinking of the viral videos that had surely spread from her evacuation. About the helicopters, the soldier in the library, all of it. A limited cover story has already been implemented, Chun explained. A case of mistaken identity leading to a security response that was ultimately determined to be unnecessary. Your classmates' social media posts have been subtly redirected to support this narrative. The careful management of public perception was both impressive and slightly unsettling, a reminder that the world of intelligence operations had rules and capabilities that operated beneath the surface of ordinary life. Olivia wondered how many other incidents in the news had similar hidden dimensions. How many families besides hers lived with secrets beneath their public personas? And what about us? Michael asked, the question encompassing far more than operational details. What happens when we return? Colonel Hargrove's expression softened slightly. That's entirely up to you. The security parameters are flexible enough to accommodate whatever family configuration you determine is appropriate. Separate residences, shared housing, formal reunification. Our concern is maintaining the safety of an invaluable asset and his family, not dictating personal arrangements. The freedom implicit in this statement settled over the Thompson family. The operational requirements that had driven their separation for 6 years had finally been superseded by recognition of their human needs and choices. The decision about their future now rested with them rather than with intelligence agencies or international threats. 2 weeks after giving her lunch to a quiet soldier, Olivia Thompson returned to Jefferson High, walking through hallways that seemed simultaneously familiar and foreign after her extraordinary absence. The cover story had been effectively implemented. Classmates asked about the crazy mix-up and shared conspiracy theories about mistaken identity and overzealous government agents, but the true events remained safely obscured beneath layers of carefully constructed narrative. Her father had returned to Millfield as well, though not initially to the family home. He and Elizabeth had agreed to a gradual reintegration, beginning with separate residences while they rediscovered each other as the people they had become during their years apart. his new cover position as a returning environmental engineering consultant provided a plausible explanation for his prolonged absence that neighbors accepted without question. Chess became their bridge, weekly games that brought the three of them together in neutral territory, creating space for conversation that meandered between ordinary family concerns and the extraordinary experiences they had shared. These sessions became a ritual of reconnection, each game building understanding that extended beyond the movement of pieces across the board. As months passed, the Thompson family evolved into a new configuration that honored both their shared history and their separate journeys. Michael's gradual reintegration into their daily lives progressed naturally, guided by mutual respect rather than presumed roles or expectations. By the time Olivia's college acceptance letters arrived, including the coveted offer from MIT, they had established a family dynamic that acknowledged the fractures of the past while building strength for the future. The morning Olivia left for college, her parents stood together in the driveway, watching as she loaded the last of her belongings into the car. The scene might have appeared ordinary to neighbors, proud parents sending their daughter off to university, but the journey that had brought them to this moment was anything but conventional. "I packed something for you," Michael said, handing Olivia a small box as she prepared to depart. "Something to remember us by when you're busy changing the world with that remarkable mind of yours." Inside, she found a chess piece, a black queen, intricately carved from obsidian with subtle molecular patterns etched into its surface. "It's beautiful," she said, turning it to catch the morning light. "But I can't play with just one piece." "It's not for playing," her father explained, with a smile. "It's a reminder that sometimes the most powerful moves come from unexpected positions, and that patterns others can't see are still very real to those who know how to look for them." Elizabeth wrapped an arm around Olivia's shoulders. "It's also a promise that we'll be here when you come home, not just physically present, but emotionally available. Whatever shape our family takes going forward, it includes you, always." As Olivia drove away from Millfield toward her future at MIT, the obsidian chess piece rested in her pocket, a tangible connection to the extraordinary events that had transformed her understanding of family, duty, and her own capabilities. The simple act of giving lunch to a quiet soldier had set in motion a sequence that revealed hidden truths, uncovered latent strengths, and ultimately created the conditions for healing wounds that had seemed beyond repair. Some might call it coincidence or fate that she had approached Sergeant Reeves in the library that day. But Olivia Thompson, with her inherited gift for seeing patterns others missed, recognized it as something more profound, a moment when ordinary kindness intersected with extraordinary circumstances, creating the opportunity for transformation that might otherwise never have occurred. The helicopters that had circled her school were long gone, their thundering presence faded into carefully managed public memory. But the truths they had brought into the open remained, reshaping the landscape of her life in ways both challenging and profound. And for that unexpected gift, the opportunity to know her father not just as the memory of childhood, but as the complex, dedicated man he had become, Olivia found herself oddly grateful to the quiet soldier who had never been what he seemed. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.